Phantom limb sensation. Even though the person knows their hand is no longer there, can clearly see that the part has been removed from their body, they still feel the hand sometimes. At times it itches, sometimes it hurts, or feels heavy. And the strangest part is that all these sensations are felt in the same area. They feel something in a part of the body that no longer exists. This is called phantom limb sensation, a bodily deception where the brain continues to believe that a missing body part is still real. This phenomenon reveals an interesting quality of our brain. It continuously tracks our body through a mental image known as the body schema. When a part of the body is removed, whether due to an accident, surgery, or war, this image in the brain remains unchanged. The brain struggles to accept the absence of the limb, so it continues to generate the feeling that the part is still there. You might assume this happens only to amputees, those who have had a body part surgically or traumatically removed. But similar sensations can also occur in people whose bodies are fully intact. This happens when a body part remains in the same position for an extended period or becomes temporarily numb. For a moment, the brain forgets the presence of that body part, and when it regains sensation, there is a brief jolt or confusion, a mild version of phantom sensation. Now imagine a body that is physically incomplete yet still feels whole. Pain is experienced in a limb that no longer exists. It's bizarre. This isn't just science. It's a question of existence. When we ask ourselves, "Who am I?" we often associate our identity with our physical body. But when the body itself denies the presence of a part, are we still the same? Phantom limb sensation is not just a feeling of being limbless. It is the result of the brain's resistance to change. The brain stubbornly clings to the body map it has created. This is where physiology and perception intersect. Some patients report pain in their amputated hands. They feel itching in fingers that no longer exist and attempt to relieve it by rubbing the air where their hand used to be. And sometimes this actually works, because what's needed is not a real limb, but to convince the brain of its presence. This is where mirror box therapy comes in, a technique that uses a mirror to create the illusion that the missing limb still exists. When the patient sees its reflection moving, the brain is tricked into believing it is real, which often results in pain relief. This therapy satisfies the mind's eye, offering treatment solely for the brain. So what does this mean? Does it imply that what we feel, all that pain, is actually happening inside the brain? And if the brain can be convinced that something exists or doesn't, it accepts it as reality? Phantom limb sensation is more than a bodily illusion. It's a phenomenon of existence. It shows that we are not just bones and flesh. We are a mental construct, constantly shaped by the brain. Now comes a chilling thought. If the brain is powerful enough to feel a body part that no longer exists, could it also give you the illusion of your very self? Do we truly exist, or are we just phantom selves? Part of the hollow mask illusion? Dissociation. You are watching from outside, your own thoughts, your own voice, your own face. You're present in the room, physically there, but it doesn't feel like you. Your hands are moving, your mouth is speaking, but everything seems detached. This experience of functioning on autopilot can be deeply unsettling, but it's not merely a glitch in the system. Rather, it's a profound and mysterious ability of the brain. It's known as dissociation. When consciousness disconnects from itself, we feel as though our sense of self, our identity, body, and mind has fragmented. But dissociation reveals that this relationship isn't as stable or fixed as we often assume. It typically arises when the brain becomes overwhelmed by its own experiences due to extreme stress, trauma, or exhaustion, and instinctively disconnects as a psychological defense mechanism. It's as if the mind says, "This experience is too intense. Let's step away from it for a while." Imagine you're in the middle of a heated argument, raised voices, surging emotions, and suddenly you realize you're watching yourself, as though it's a play and you're just a spectator. Or an old memory flashes back so vividly that you're pulled into it, and the boundary with the present blurs. Dissociation doesn't only stem from trauma, it can weave into the mundane moments of everyday life. You're driving and suddenly realize you've covered several kilometers on autopilot. Or you're reading a book and become so absorbed that your body remains in the room, while your mind drifts somewhere else. These experiences reveal something powerful. The self is not a fixed entity, but a flow, a shifting center of awareness. Dissociation introduces a crack in this flow, but this crack isn't always negative. In fact, some meditation techniques, like vipassana or transcendental meditation, intentionally guide us into dissociating from our thoughts. We begin to observe our emotions as they rise and fall, recognizing them without getting entangled. We enter into an observer mode, where we feel the pain but don't merge with it. This can feel like a liberation, a temporary escape from the confines of our own mind. But there's also a darker side. When dissociation becomes habitual, we risk disconnecting from our own lives. Experiences start to feel unreal, relationships feel shallow, and ironically, in the act of dissociating more and more, we lose ourselves the most. Dissociation shows us that consciousness is not fixed. It depends heavily on context. What we call self doesn't always mean the same thing. And most importantly, this hidden mental trick forces us to ask a profound question. What am I doing to myself? If I am watching, then who am I? Am I the one observing or the one being observed? Dissociation isn't a bug in the system. It's a hidden feature of the mind, a survival tool. But when we rely on it too much, we drift too far from ourselves. That's why it's crucial to return to the body, to the experience, to the self, because only when we stop merely observing ourselves can we begin to truly live again. Rubber hand illusion. Imagine a fake rubber hand placed on a table right in front of you. Your actual hand is hidden beneath a cloth, completely out of sight. A scientist or a researcher then begins brushing both the rubber hand and your concealed real hand at the same time, in the same way. Within just a few minutes, your brain makes a fascinating error. As the motions are synchronized and consistent, your mind begins to believe that the rubber hand is actually your own. This is the rubber hand illusion, a strange trick that reveals how our brain constructs our sense of self. It challenges the question, who am I? And shows how easily our self-perception can be manipulated. As your eyes focus on the rubber hand, they see the touch being applied, and your skin simultaneously feels that same touch. Your brain combines these two signals, what you see and what you feel, and creates a new reality. This hand is mine. Now, if someone were to suddenly stab the rubber hand with a needle or strike it with a hammer, you'd likely flinch or pull away in fear. Why? Because your brain has developed an emotional connection to that hand. Think about it. Even a lifeless piece of rubber can become part of your self-awareness, just through a bit of visual and tactile synchronization. This doesn't mean your brain is foolish. On the contrary, It means your brain is always choosing the most logical explanation based on your experience. When it sees something being touched and you feel a touch at the same moment, it concludes, that must be me. But this realization becomes even more unsettling when you go deeper. If simply stroking a fake hand can convince the brain it belongs to you, then what about the rest of your body? Could it be that your whole body is just a feeling? Am I just a story my brain is telling itself? The rubber hand illusion isn't just a trick of sight and touch. It's a deception of consciousness. It acts like a mirror reflecting how easily we can mistake the fake for the real. It forces us to ask, is there really such a thing as a solid, unchanging self? This illusion is not just a scientific experiment. It's a bridge from the neuroscience lab straight into the realm of existential philosophy. There comes a point where the brain is fully capable of adopting artificial body parts as its own. And if that's true, then what about our emotions, our relationships, our thoughts? Could those be rubber too? Imagine waking up one day to discover that everything, your thoughts, your memories, your identity, are not permanent truths, but instant constructions of the brain, just like the rubber hand. No enduring reality, just illusion. And as you drift off to sleep, you may find yourself wondering, am I really who I think I am? Or just a product of accumulated experiences? The rubber hand illusion isn't just an experiment. It's a crack in the wall, a glimpse through which we can peer at the edges of our own existence, and maybe even beyond it. Semantic satiation. Blue. Have you ever said a word over and over again until, suddenly, it starts to sound strange? The sound remains the same, but its meaning seems to dissolve. You begin to wonder, are these really words or just meaningless sounds? This experience is known as semantic satiation. When a word is repeated multiple times in quick succession, it begins, at least temporarily, to lose its meaning. It may sound like a joke, but there's a deeper cognitive process at play. Behind every word in our mind, there's an associated meaning, an experience, and often an emotion. Say the word blue. Instantly, your brain activates a network of associations. The color itself, the sky, the ocean, maybe even someone's blue shirt. But if you start repeating it, blue, 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 your brain's semantic processing system becomes overloaded. It gets fatigued and then temporarily shuts down. At that moment, the word blue detaches from meaning. It becomes nothing more than a strange, hollow sound. This isn't a malfunction. It's a protective mechanism, a cognitive safeguard to prevent linguistic overload. It ensures that repetition doesn't confuse or exhaust our ability to process meaning. But this phenomenon runs deeper than it seems. It's not just limited to words. Our thoughts, our beliefs, even our sense of identity can all fall victim to this kind of mental saturation. Think about a word that once carried emotional weight for you: forgiveness, love, freedom. If these words are repeated in every context, in every conversation, eventually they lose their edge. They begin to feel empty. They become noise. And this is the darker side of the trick. Semantic satiation doesn't just blur words, it dismantles meaning itself. It reveals that meanings are not solid or permanent, they're fragile. They can be erased through repetition. Consider promotional media and advertising. Words like security, prosperity, freedom, they're repeated endlessly. They sound familiar, but over time, they lose their gravity. They stop feeling real. Now ask yourself, if language itself is unstable, if even words can break apart, then what about the words we use to build our world, our understanding, our relationships, our trust? How stable are they? Semantic satiation shows us that words are more than just sounds. They are containers of meaning. But when that meaning begins to fade, maybe it's time to pause, to sit in silence, and rediscover what those words were meant to carry in the first place. Mirror manipulation. I'm alone in the room. The lighting is dim, and hanging on the wall ahead is something simple, a mirror. You watch the faint reflection of your face slowly shifting. You're looking at yourself, and then a strange realization hits. The face gazing back at you might not be yours anymore. You don't look like you did just a few seconds ago. Your face begins to distort. Your eyes seem larger. Your nose slightly off center. Your face appears to melt. You wonder, is this just my imagination? But it isn't merely a hallucination. It's a profound neurological trick called mirror manipulation. It demonstrates how your brain reacts when it's exposed to the same visual stimulus for an extended time. With this trick, the boundary between what's real and what's imagined starts to dissolve. In scientific terms, this is known as the strange face illusion. When you stare at your reflection in a mirror, especially under low light, your brain begins to fatigue. Your visual processing falters. Your perception starts filling in missing information. That's when the distortion begins. Your face shifts gradually, sometimes dramatically. It might even appear as if someone else, a bizarre and terrifying stranger, has replaced your image. And remember, this isn't happening through someone else's gaze. It's you, looking at yourself. Now reflect on this. How many times a day do we look at ourselves in mirrors? But are we ever truly seeing ourselves? Or are we only seeing the version of our face that the brain constructs for us? Mirror manipulation suggests something unsettling. Maybe we never really see ourselves at all. Our brains are trained to normalize what we perceive. If one of our eyes is misaligned or our lips aren't perfectly symmetrical, the brain still builds a balanced version of our face to protect our self-image. But if you stare at that face long enough, in stillness, in silence, that balance starts to fall apart. Psychological studies have shown that people who rate their appearance a 10 still experience strange distortions after staring at themselves in a dimly lit mirror for just 1 minute. They begin to see ghostly images. Their eye color appears to change. Some even report sensing a presence behind them. Why does this happen? Because the brain has processing limits. When exposed to the same input again and again, without variation, it becomes confused. It stops processing and starts inventing. This is a form of sensory deprivation, and it can lead to hallucination. Now consider this. A mirror, something we face every day, holds this power. This phenomenon isn't just about science or illusion. It goes deeper. It touches our consciousness and identity. Who are you? When you ask yourself this question and search for the answer in your reflection, you might realize that reflection was never truly real. Have you ever glanced in a bathroom mirror and, for a brief moment, felt something odd, as if you were looking at yourself, but couldn't fully recognize what you saw? That's mirror manipulation at work, a psychological trick that subtly attacks your sense of self. And now, a chilling thought. If you started to see your face this way every day, would you eventually forget what your real face looked like? Mirror manipulation teaches us that the line between perception and reality is only a few seconds wide. What we see is not always the truth, and sometimes even our own faces can deceive us. The paradox of choice. There they are, rows of jars: strawberry, blueberry, mango, orange marmalade, kiwi, fig. You stand there for a while, taking them all in, and yet, often, you walk away empty-handed. Sometimes, more options don't bring more freedom. They make us stuck. This is what we call the paradox of choice, the phenomenon where more choices lead to less satisfaction. Because with each decision, you're also choosing to give up everything else. You pick one, but the mind lingers on the unpicked ones. What if that other option had been better? Did I make a mistake? That nagging regret begins to gnaw away at the happiness of what you actually chose. In today's world, where everything is customizable, from clothes to careers to even life partners, we're technically more free, but maybe we're more burdened too. In the past, life offered fewer paths. Now, there's a choice waiting at every turn. And while that sounds empowering, every new option can feel like another weight. Because the more doors you open, the harder it gets to choose just one to walk through. And that's the tricky part of this paradox. More options can mean less satisfaction. More control can mean more confusion. We often think freedom is having endless choice, but maybe real freedom lies in having fewer choices and more clarity. The paradox of choice shows us that sometimes it's the absence of abundance that gives rise to understanding. It teaches us less can indeed be more. The invisible gorilla. You're sitting in front of a screen. The video begins. 6 people appear, 3 dressed in white, 3 in black, passing a basketball. You're given a simple task. Count how many times the players in white pass the ball. You focus. 1 pass, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the video stops. You're asked a single question. Did you see the gorilla? You're stunned. What gorilla? The video plays again. And this time, you see it. A person in a gorilla suit walks right into the frame, stops, looks straight at the camera, then walks away. Slowly. You're shocked you missed it. This is the invisible gorilla illusion, a powerful psychological trick that reveals a hidden truth, the limits of your awareness. It's not that the gorilla was hidden. Your eyes were open, but your brain couldn't register it. Why? Because your attention was locked on counting passes. Your focus was so narrow that everything else, no matter how obvious, was invisible. And here lies the deeper truth. No matter how intelligent you are, your attention can only process so much. This illusion teaches us that seeing and noticing are not the same. We believe what we see is the full picture, but in reality, we only see what we focus on. Now think, if something as obvious as a gorilla can slip past your awareness, how many other things, important, meaningful, real, might you be missing every day? The invisible gorilla isn't just a trick. It's a mirror. It reveals your blind spots. It shows that truth is limited by perception, and the sharper that perception feels, the more narrow it might actually be. Now imagine, if your whole life you've only been counting what you were taught to count, will you ever notice the gorilla standing in plain sight? And here lies the final question this illusion leaves us with. If we only see what we're looking for, where does everything else go? Your awareness slows. Your attention shrinks. And maybe, in that moment, when you close your eyes, your own gorilla is standing right there. A truth A reality, always present, but never seen. The invisible hand trick. At some point, we've all had this experience. You're in a room, completely alone, yet you feel a presence. No one is seen. Nothing is heard. Still, it feels like someone is there. Why does this happen? Is someone really nearby? Did your senses detect something? Or is your brain simply playing tricks on your fears and anxieties? This phenomenon is not supernatural. It's a psychological trick known as the invisible hand trick, a strange and eerie situation where the mind perceives something beyond the reach of our physical senses. And it can feel so incredibly real that you start to question your own perception. Imagine you're sitting alone in a dark room. It's quiet, completely still. Suddenly, it feels like someone has placed a hand on your back. You spin around, but there's no one there. No wind, no draft. And yet, you felt it. That pressure, that coolness, that contact. This is the invisible hand trick. It's a type of somatosensory illusion, an illusion created within the very system that allows us to feel touch. Your body's touch processing network has misinterpreted reality. This illusion doesn't need an actual hand. Your brain creates the sensation all on its own. And suddenly, it feels like someone is near you, or worse, touching you. So what causes this strange effect? Your brain is always connected to your body, constantly processing signals, touch, temperature, pressure, and building patterns from this sensory information. But sometimes, this processing goes wrong, and you feel a presence that isn't really there. When the brain mismatches signals from the body, your senses can misfire, causing the illusion that someone is standing close or that you've been physically touched. This happens more often in moments of mental exhaustion or emotional stress. If you've been alone for too long, if your sensory input is weakened, your brain begins to fill in the blanks. It manufactures sensations. It tricks you into believing someone, is near. Studies show this trick is most powerful when your mind is under pressure, especially at night, when you're tired, alone, and anxious. Your brain, trying to make sense of limited input, can project the presence of another person. It's not real, but it feels real. And the most fascinating part? This trick reveals a profound truth. What you feel may be nothing more than a product of your imagination. When we're scared, our senses become hyperactive. They start paying closer attention. And suddenly, we feel things that don't exist. That's when the boundary between reality and mental illusion starts to disappear. Have you ever felt someone behind you while walking alone to the bathroom at night? Heard a sound when there was nobody around? Experienced a mysterious touch in an empty room? If yes, then you've encountered the invisible hand trick. This phenomenon impacts a deep part of the brain, the place where perception and reality collide. On a deeper level, it suggests the lonelier and more stressed we are, the more likely it becomes that our minds will generate phantom sensations. But here's the catch. It's not always a flaw. Sometimes, it's a self-defense mechanism. Your brain creates the illusion of a presence, not to scare you, but to keep you alert, to warn you of possible danger. It gives you the feeling of being watched, to heighten your awareness, to make you ready. But the truth is, that unseen force, it's not around you. It's within you, born from your own mind.